Better Off Dead has always been one of my favorites as far as the 80s teen movies. Now, unlike most of the John Hughes movies, almost all of Better Off Dead was filmed right here in Los Angeles, except for a few of the ski scenes that were filmed in Utah. So today, we're going to hunt for the filming locations for the 1985 teen love story, Better Off Dead. Let's go. Ah!
$2.
Let's go see what we can find. A lot of scenes take place right here at this house behind me. This is, of course, Lane Meyer's house. The movie starts here where we see Lane waking up and getting ready for the ski team tryouts. And Lane's dad wakes up and tries to rush downstairs to stop Johnny the paperboy from breaking out the very last window in the garage. Johnny would have been riding his bike down the street right here. And we actually see him pass right by this house. Now, speaking of coming down this street, this is also where later in the movie we see the mailman, played by the late, great Taylor Negron, walking down the street, going through the mail, dropping it everywhere. Now, as you can see, they've replaced the garage door. It no longer has those windows. Of course, they had to replace it after Lane drove the car right through it. They also would have had to get a new roof right after Badger flew his space shuttle right through this section right here. And right here at the end of the driveway is where Lane kept his Camaro underneath the tarp. Now, Lane, of course, just had to have that car because Beth told him that the car was...
I believe the term was tasty.
That would have been where the next door neighbor was that Lane's dad keeps running into him. And then on Christmas Day, they run into each other and they're both wearing the Aardvark jacket.
Merry Christmas.
Now, if this is Lane's house, that means that right across the street must be Ricky's house. And there it is, Ricky's house, and it looks exactly the same as it did. Right up there, that's the window where we first see Monique looking out, staring at Lane. Of course, probably one of the most memorable scenes that takes place in front of these houses is where Lane pulls up right here and he sees Monique throwing lemons at the street sign. Monique would have been standing right here on the lawn throwing lemons at a sign that would have been over here. Now, I'm not sure if there really was a sign there at the time, but there's not one anymore. The first time Lane comes across the two brothers that want to race him, he's going through this intersection, doesn't realize the light's red, and he stops right here in the middle. The traffic light would have been right there on the corner. I'm assuming that was added just for the movie. Now, once he stops for the red light, he backs up right here past all of this. And once he gets right about here, that's where he first sees the two brothers. Now, of course, he forgets that his car was in reverse and he ends up backing into Rocco, who would have been right behind him. And when Rocco gets out of the car and threatens to activate his dental plan, you can actually see the sign right over here. It's covered up now, but the sign for Bethany Church, and we'll see that a bit later in the movie. The second time Lane comes across the two brothers, he's now coming south down Baldwin as he approaches the exact same intersection, but on the opposite side. This is where he stops and he comes across the two brothers once again. This time he doesn't realize that Rocco's in front of him and he ends up rear-ending him right here. This is where Lane and Charles are playing football and where Lane first sees Beth. Now, they would have been playing football somewhere in this area, and Beth and her friend would have been sitting over there at those picnic tables. The picnic tables have been updated, but that's where they would have been sitting. And you can actually see that lamppost in the background behind Beth. Now, of course, Lane is running right here and he's paying attention to Beth and doesn't see the family that's having a picnic right here, and he steps in their food. And if you pause that scene you can actually see these mailboxes right across the way and these stone pillars. Lane is once again driving south on Baldwin Avenue when he begins to hear all the love songs played on the radio. He ends up ripping out the radio and tossing it out the window. It goes sliding on the street right here and goes right past 169 North Baldwin Avenue. You can actually see the address on the curb. Now this school is used for just the outside shot of the students walking through the courtyard. There's now a fence going around the school, and I can't get down there to show you the exact shot, but you can match up right here, this flagpole with these walkways. And then if I move over here, you can see this section of the building. Now again, this was only used for that one shot. The main school that was used is just a couple of miles from here. This was the main school used in the movie. Now just a couple of miles from here is Rosemont Middle School, and it's pretty much an exact replica of this school. My wife actually attended Rosemont Middle School, and she used to think that she went to the school from the movie. Even a few of her teachers told her that it was used in the movie because it looks so much like this school. Pretty much the only way you can tell the difference is by some of the surrounding scenery. Now, unfortunately, the bad news is they now lock up the campus and there's no way to get inside there. These gates used to always be open. I've actually been in there multiple times, but I've come back a few times trying to get inside and it's just not possible anymore. But as I'm sure you can tell, this is where Lane is leaving the New Year's Eve dance and first talks with Monique. And right there is the cafeteria where they had the New Year's Eve dance, and then of course where they have all their lunches. Now, like I said, I have been in there and it definitely is the right place. The cafeteria still looks exactly the same. You can see right there, that's where Lane leaves the dance, and then Monique shortly after follows him. And then just beyond the cafeteria, out there in the middle of the school, there's an amphitheater, and there's actually a promo picture of the cast sitting in that amphitheater. And right here is where Lane pulls up after launching his car into the mud puddle. If these trees weren't here, we would have the same shot of the mountains. Now they get out of the car and they're walking into school, and the camera turns and it's shooting this way. Now all these awnings weren't here at the time. Now right here, this is where Lane is on the other side of the bridge thinking about jumping off. And the way we know that this is the exact spot is when his buddy,
Charles DeMar,
is riding up on his bike. He passes right by a lamppost and then a utility pole, and Lane would have been right here. Now those shots looking down at the street from the bridge, I think were actually shot somewhere else, because as you can see, it's not actually a street right below where he was standing, it's a parking lot. Right there, that's where Lane would have been standing. And the trash truck comes right under the bridge, and if you look really closely in that shot, you can actually see that the trash truck is driving on grass right there, and it's not an actual street. After Lane falls on the trash truck, it moves this way through the parking lot. And again, if you look closely, you can actually see the lines of the parking spaces. The trash truck heads this way through the parking lot, and somewhere right here would have been the two guys trimming the trees. This was Joanne Greenwald's house. Lane pulls up right here in front of the house, walks up those steps to the front door. Right there in front of that exact door is where they would have stood while Joanne calculates their entire date. Now this used to be Sandy's Burgers, which of course was Pig Burger in the movie, where Lane worked very temporarily. And of course where one of the most iconic scenes in the movie took place. And of course, watching this as a kid, it was definitely my favorite scene. Now some of you might recognize this. It was also used in the movie Tough Turf, along with that motel right next door, but we'll save that for another video. Unfortunately, Sandy's Burgers is now closed down, and they just use the lot as some type of a storage yard. And unfortunately, the odds are the building will probably eventually be torn down. And you can see those are the exact same doors that we see in the movie. This door right here on the side, that's the door that Lane and Monique walked through, and then they would have sat at the very first table just to the right of the door. And that's where Lane serenades her with his saxophone. They're heading south on Baldwin when Lane says,
"Yeah, I'm real sorry your mom blew up, Ricky."
You can see that church tower in the background behind them. Now this is the third time that Lane comes across the two brothers, except for now when he comes across them, they are stopped at that intersection. That's the same intersection when he comes across them the first time, and they're now heading north on Baldwin. Now they're stopped right here when Monique reaches over and pushes down the gas pedal, and they take off that way, and the race begins. Now that entire race is just going back and forth right here on Baldwin. Now the nuns are crossing the street right here in front of this sign for Bethany Church. Unfortunately, it's a new sign, but right here is where they are crossing the street, and Lane is heading down the street right here, coming right towards the nuns. Now, just in case you never noticed, one of those nuns is indeed carrying a giant boombox on her shoulder. Lane swerves right there to avoid hitting the nuns. His car flips around, and we see him pass right by this building, the Creative Arts Group. Still the same business all these years later. Lane loses control, and he launches right into a giant mud puddle, which would have been right here, where Bethany Christian School now is. Lane's driving right here in this parking lot when Johnny the paperboy is on the roof of his car and then all of a sudden appears on the windshield. Lane comes out of the driveway right here. He comes out of that driveway right there and makes a U-turn pretty much in the street, and you can actually see this house right here. And then as he comes back in this driveway, that's when he knocks the guy into the dumpster right here. Lane then comes racing through this intersection, right past this building, and he heads that way towards the car wash, and we get a good shot of this park right here on the corner. Lane's driving down the street right here, and we see him passing right by this car wash. Now you can see a sign in the movie that says car wash $2.50. However, I just paid $9. When Lane's first entering the car wash, you can actually see this building right here across the street. This is so cool. I'm in the actual car wash where Lane washes Johnny off the roof.
$2.
The fourth and final time that he races the two brothers is right here at the same intersection. They would have been stopped right here in the middle of the street eating Chinese food. Lane pulls up next to them in his Camaro. They're not ready, the light turns green, and they take off this way. The end of the movie takes place right here at Dodger Stadium, home of the Brooklyn Dodgers, where Lane and Monique sit on the hood of his Camaro and he plays the saxophone for her. As the camera pans out, we see Lane and Monique and Johnny